Invest and rebuild in America. Rebuild everything because we have to and because we should. I mean, it's going to be the best economy we've ever seen. Best we've seen since the original New Deal and then the post-war production. We have to because, the risks are just too large to even be talking about doing it, and there's no real benefit to not doing this. There's a lot more benefit in actually just saying, look, we're going to handle this, we're going to rebuild America, we're going to take care of the technology, and we're going to make sure that it's responsive and it's better for people to live in and grow in. America is falling behind the times. We have a massive infrastructure. One of the best in the world, but it's old. A lot of the stuff was built New Deal here in New York. Like a lot of the stuff was even before the New Deal. It's like turn of the century, and it hasn't been fully maintained. And people are trying to do their best, but it requires a huge, huge investment. It leaves a very rich and strong American people squabbling over nonsense to maintain the status quo instead of progressing. And that's what we got to do. We got to step into the future. Some of the ugly things that we are talking about here. America is number one in healthcare costs, number one in people jailed, number one in education costs per student, number one in citizens killed by agencies of the government. It's sad, but it's true. Per capita CO2 emissions in the G20. We're number one in medical bankruptcies, number one in bankruptcies, number one in medical military expenditures, and just other things like homelessness and child poverty and things like that. These numbers are just too high for such a rich country. We really need to focus. We need to get it done, and we need to also acknowledge that there's something going on with the government where a lot of these things aren't getting done. We need to take care of the problems, and we need to focus in on the facts, and then the solutions will become obvious. We have to make sure that our citizens are in a right mind frame to actually look at the problems and talk, and we're having the right conversation to solve the problems and at the right pace. America's 37th in healthcare outcomes per capita. It's one of the reasons why so many people die from COVID. We just don't have a great healthcare infrastructure. Everybody's always worried about how much it's going to cost, so they don't go talk to their doctor. 24th in math and science scores. So we're not in a place where people are even going to understand. I want to go do research on, COVID or whatever. If you're 24th in math and science scores, I think people can understand. I just don't think that they've been taught. And I think we don't teach the things that people need to know about health and science and humans and who we are and what we are. We've got to clear those up. But back to the more core project, table of contents, the overview, definition of climate change, what the history of climate change is, because we really want to talk about it, science of it and how it works, and its consistency with the Bible. If you're anti-Christian, you guys tune it out, but it's consistent with the Bible, and there's a lot of misunderstandings. So if it works for everybody, you use the language that that everybody can speak, even if you don't happen to believe it, which is not the case here. How we're going to fix this, the buildings program. Again, the solutions are going to be a little under explained, but we'll get there. Stick. What we're talking about here with the risk and reward of doing something about climate change. The stick is a slow degradation of value. It's buildings. They're getting older. Our transportation is getting older. It's going to have to get repaired. There's going to be bigger chances of, major infrastructure disasters. We keep having to try to create jobs. And again, I want to emphasize, just letting this go is the literal version of the apocalypse. I'll get into it a little bit more, but it's just too close to that to even think about doing. We have to fix it and fix it now. The carrot is actually leaning into this is 10+% GDP growth. Any business you're in with, millions and millions of new jobs is going to do better because more people working is more money to spend, more money in the economy. It's jobs wherever people are because it's based on rebuilding buildings, rebuilding the infrastructure, the plants, and everything, and the technology. So wherever people are and wherever the stuff, just upgrade that. Same thing with commercial. there is going to be some payments on mortgage payments on it, but it's not going to be anything compared to the opportunity. I mean, sometimes you have to spend a little bit of money to make money. Um, but these are going to be the jobs that are going to be here. I mean, this is 10 plus million jobs, $75,000 a year. You get trained, you get to work building the future. Like any preventative maintenance, and that's where we are. The longer it's been put off, the harder it becomes, and total loss becomes possible. 10% GDP growth, somewhere between 10 and 17 million jobs. Every home. Climate change is basically insulation for the earth. Carbon dioxide, CO2 is the pink stuff for the earth. That's what climate change is. That is its basic definition. Nothing more. It's a little more complicated than that, but it works the same way anyway. It has to do with infrared radiation, but it works out the same way. You put more of this in, whether it's insulation or insulation, you put it on, whether it's blankets or carbon dioxide. We really can measure the insulative effects. Insulation, carbon dioxide has been known since an American woman, Eunice Foote, discovered it. So let's talk about that later. Scientists have known that CO2 warms the climate for about 200. As soon as they could. No. 1824, Joseph Fourier established the existence of a natural greenhouse effect. Now, keep in mind, this guy's work is still used in trillions and trillions of dollars, probably on clothes that are on you right now. His work is still used today. In 1859, it was actually an American woman. John Tyndale was a British man, but he may have actually seen Eunice Newton Foote's work in a magazine, although that's not confirmed. But Svante Arrhenius did the first estimate of a global temperature increase from fossil fuel use. I mean, this guy's a genius, and a lot of his work is used in mechanics of every major chemical process, or should be used, because he wrote the book on it. So, I mean, these guys, we know they were right. We always knew they were right. They're geniuses in all of the fields. And 97% of climate scientists say we're experiencing global warming. You can't get 97% of people to agree on nothing. That's a pretty astounding number. Anything over 70% is usually crazy. Say 51% in Congress, we see how hard that is. 97% agreement among a group of people is the smartest people in the room, the people who get up every day and check temperatures and thermometers every day, agreeing. That's a whole lot of agreement. An American scientist, Eunice Foote, measured the insulative, at least Newton Foote, measured by the insulative effects of carbon dioxide a few years before Tyndall in the 1850s. It was an important number to have quantified because, I mean, it's also something we would still use today in terms of the basis for how we qualify the numbers and how we think about the insulative effects of these gases. She measured it for the United States. U.S. petroleum production averaged about 18.37 million barrels per day. That's from the Energy Information Administration. It's compiled from the oil industry statistics. These are basically in oil industry statistics. 18 million barrels of oil used in the United States every single day. 18 million barrels. That's a lot. So that means that, and then the carbon dioxide that's released from that oil burning is 18 billion pounds of carbon dioxide every single day. That's 18 million multiplied by 950 pounds of CO2 per barrel. So that's how much carbon dioxide is given off into the atmosphere every day in America. That's nearly 80 pounds per American per day. Man, woman, or child for all 330 million Americans. And with other sources, like, say, the stuff China makes for us and the coal they burn to make it with, comes from us. CO2 per American per day, it comes to close to 150 pounds of CO2 per day. I mean, it may be more, it may be less, but it's pretty close to that. A lot closer than your guess would be. RCP 8.5 is the maximum scenario by the United Nations for how much it could possibly warm in the atmosphere. And that's something like 17 degrees warmer per per day. Like, it's not a, even if it was half of that, it would be an unacceptable risk to. I mean, it's just chaos. Like, you don't want to control that. If icebergs start melting, like, you don't want to have to try to rope icebergs back in. We can measure this. It's too much. Worldwide, humans turn 100 billion tons of extracted from the natural environment into 67 billion tons of trash and waste gases each year, the National Geographic statistic. I mean, but you do end up having to trust statistics from somewhere, and it sounds about right. Like, I mean, disposable society, we waste too much trash, and all you have to do is be a person. You don't have to be any kind of person, but just as long as you take your trash out of somewhere at some point in time, and shame on you if you don't, because we produce so much of it. You got to know, like, we produce too much of it. It's a pain in the butt, and it's completely new, and we end up wasting perfectly good things. We just got to do better. I mean, we do have a beautiful life. We don't have to not have one, but we do have to do better in terms of not making things disposable. We got to make things durable and sustainable and align with the physical economy to the monetary economy. Simple. So climate change is like pretty close to the literal apocalypse. In fact, we might be in, sort of like a time of revelations where everything shifts really quickly. Um, but things like war, disease, I mean, all of these things are scientific certainties. If, the temperature changes by 17 degrees overall, like, I mean, you're going to end up having abandoned cities and all kinds of crazy accidents happening, coming at us quicker and quicker, and it gets harder and harder to deal with and more expensive. It's preventative maintenance. And I mean, the numbers are just off the charts, like that, as we've been discussing. Like, it's time to make a change. There's no reason not to make a change. And it's jobs wherever there are people. Like, I don't know how to say that too much more. Like, improving the environment for the people and making it better. And on the other side of that, we have the horsemen of the apocalypse, and then we don't want to be sexist anymore. There's two real big girls on elephants. That's why you don't see them with the four horsemen. They're riding elephants, and they're called hurricanes. They're, you know, a real pain in the butt, and they're coming to smack you up. I mean, water's getting warmer, hurricanes happen. We need to just do whatever we do to avoid the worst of what's coming. I mean, it's just not, and it's very fixable. And of course, we can build the future, we build everything to the future. Um, the George Jetson cities, like the kind of money that we have, we could have been done, did it a long time ago. And right now, it's a genuine national security risk. We have to move to the future. Oh, well, we'll have to realign all of our environment and make it better for everybody to live, better for us to grow, move forward as a people. Revelations is misinterpretation. It's not the beginning of the end, but the end of the beginning, and the beginning of the future, the next steps. So there were some darker things that were kind of possibly going to happen, but I swallowed all of it. It's cool. We're gonna do good. We're gonna do good. So build a structure for our children to go strong, happy. We want to measure this somehow. I don't quite know yet, but there's very real characteristics, like, feeling like not mentally challenged, but to have challenges to your mind, and past over. Think towards the future. There's definitely a lot of science to answer. Productive capacity, we're going to have to look at it. I mean, we're going to have to learn to use
to harness as much artificial intelligence as we're effort on that as we do on natural intelligence. Make sure we're spending that on the future for our children, and spending our money and dollars on developing, the structures a little bit better. Like, we've learned a few things since the 1940s, and they need to reflect that in buildings. They're very important. They're our current, housing environment. But small changes, like not taking care of the code on the sounds, the decibel levels. Like, I've been doing the sounds. It's tough for people in places like New York City. Like, I would think it would be a little literal. I mean, it does make the city a little less livable. We need to have more public bathrooms here in New York City. We're getting a much better. I mean, New York City is doing a lot more for recycling than other places. Like, actually having separating bins and starting to train its citizens on it. But we got a lot to go, and a very, very long period of not doing preventative maintenance. Like, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing, but we really need to focus. We need to get this done, and we do it for our future, for our families, and take this opportunity to, really shine, and to have a chance to have our spaces reflect, the art, the beauty that's in our minds, and create a lasting heritage, as part of a much bigger whole that understands itself better, because we're going to see ourselves.